I have been denied. My cravings have been demonized. My desires vilified. My body called a temple desecrated. My value to appease someone else's carnal needs. But what of my own? I shall leave Adam. I shall embrace my fallen angel. I shall seek revenge for my children, children of the night. I shall feast. Welcome to the world of night, my darlings. This episode, we'll be talking about the oldest origins of vampirism and who should be considered the original vampire. In this case, we're diving into some real-world lore today. So, sorry, historian. Not all vampires are romantic, but vampires are known for their XXX implications. They're literally a parable for the loss of your innocence, after all. So to appease my YouTube overlords, I will be replacing all XXX words with spicy. Thank you for your understanding. Before we begin, let's talk about sources. In this video, we'll be using a variety of sources, which include real-world mythologies. I will not be directly quoting any specific source in this episode, but rather paraphrasing a mixture of those sources together like an academic essay. My first degree is in cultural anthropology, focusing on mythology, and my second degree is in literature, focused on paranormal and fantasy. So I've legit spent my whole life focused on researching not only vampires, but other kinds of lore around the world. Writing and lore are as much a passion of mine as gaming, so I'm excited to share this deep dive with you today. And it's time for a trigger warning. In this episode, we'll be talking about Sumerian and Jewish mythology. Not only is it relevant to vampirism, but it's also my own paternal heritage. If you're someone who can't handle discussions about mythology that predates the Bible, because newsflash, Christianity came from Judaism, then you might want to sit this one out. Oh, and all of Has-Been Hotel. But if you're someone who loves demons, vampires, and strong women with a husband who'd literally fall into the depths of hell for you, then you're gonna love this one, babe. And we are talking about vampires here, not religion. So let's keep the comments on subject. Just because we're gonna discuss some topics that some modern religions might pull from doesn't mean we're opening the door to any toxicity, fighting, or any attempts to convert people. Thank you in advance for respecting each other, because no less is acceptable, my darlings. And one last warning, some adult themes are mentioned that could be triggering, including spicy violations and the loss of children's lives, so please proceed with caution. If you want more content on vampires or other paranormal lore, drop me some black heart emojis and comment exactly what lore you want to know about next. And with that, grab your cozy drink and settle in, because we're about to go a little deep. So who was the first official vampire? Well, if we're talking about the oldest recorded person called a vampire, that would be Jere Grendo Alvet, a villager from the late 1500s to early 1600s in Croatia. 16 years after his death, Jere rose from his grave. He came to the village each night and knocked upon the doors of villagers. Anyone whose door he knocked upon, who invited him into their home, someone in the home was found dead the next day. One night, the priestess Giorgio caught him with the widow Ivana. The corpse was feasting upon her, smiling, gasping for air, and then essayed her in front of the father. They went to the graveyard and dug him up and attempted to kill him in his coffin with a hawthorn stick. Another commonly shared version of the first vampire tale, though not of Yuri, is of a man traveling at night. There was a man driving a carriage, and another man stopped his cart and asked him for a ride into the village. The man driving felt a sheer wave of evil off of this strange man, but was too afraid to deny him. In the village, they rode past homes. Each one had a cross or a protective talisman on their door. The odd man said, "Locked," to each one. Then they happened upon a house that didn't have a cross or a talisman. The man shouted, "Unlocked," and rushed for the home. The door was actually locked, but the evil man was able to burst through the door and enter the home, and the carriage driver could hear screams. First, the deathly scream of a man, followed by the spicy screams of a woman. Then the evil man returned with buckets of blood. He forced the carriage driver to return him to the graveyard. The carriage driver watched the man drinking down the blood at the graveyard and while the beast was distracted, the driver stabbed him in his heart with a huge wooden stick, and the man burst into ashes. However, despite both of these times being the earliest recollections of the word vampire being used in written form, they are far from the earliest time where someone has committed the act of vampirism. As stated in the last chapter, Goerres was the first person that the title vampire was used for. However, there have been long-running mythologies of creatures and gods who feast upon the blood of humans. So welcome to Mesopotamia, the civilization that is known as the oldest recorded civilization, and one of the 4 oldest in the world. The land of Mesopotamia included the Babylonians, the Sumerians, and the Assyrians. Oftentimes today we wrap those 3 major cities together under Sumerian as an umbrella term, much like how technically the Germanic region during the Roman Empire included the majority of Central Europe, all the way up to Norway. Which, fun fact, calling back to that kobold episode, when I say something is Germanic lore, I'm not saying that it's 100% from Germany, but rather that it's from the Germanic region. Similar to how if I say something is Celtic lore, I'm not saying that it's specific to my Irish side, I'm saying that it's specific to that region. The formation of what today we would consider to be solely Jewish culture was not broken away from Mesopotamia until Abraham led his people from Babylon, around about 1900 BCE. So yes, people who are of the Jewish faith originated from Mesopotamia. Keep in mind, although some of this chapter might appear in the Bible, I'm not discussing Christian mythology. The Bible didn't start being canonized from the various texts, including the Tanakh and the New Testament, until around 200 BCE, and not all Jewish lore was kept in Christianity. As well, again, we're talking about mythology here, not religion. Though they seem similar, they are not the same thing. Mesopotamia is also known as the cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia was known to be between the Tigris and the Euphrates, which also happens to be the location of the Garden of Eden. But it's also the cradle of the first bloodsucker, and thus vampirism. If you've been reading my Gemstone Souls series, specifically the new book DLC, which added like 200 extra pages, my bad, you'll actually know some of the characters and gods that we're going to talk about today, because I did, in fact, use a lot of lore from the original vampire in my own mythos. But today I'm going to be sharing the real story, not my weird twisted inspiration that came from it. And as this story threads through multiple mythologies, I'm going to stick to reciting the most common version, which happens to be Jewish. I will be mostly using Jewish names and versions of the story, but I'll try my best to relate to parable figures and other Sumerian lore. So let's meet her. Yes, her. The first real vampire. Meet Lilith. Lilith was the first wife of Adam. Lilith, like Adam, was created from dust. She was meant to be an equal to Adam. However, Adam sought submission from Lilith without offering in exchange for her compliance. Adam demanded that during spicy times, Lilith was to lie beneath him, to give without receiving, so Lilith denied him. Adam refused to accept Lilith's rejection, and in nearly all, but not every single, version, Adam forced himself onto Lilith. Afraid, violated, and stripped of her virtue, Lilith ran from the garden. Later in the story, she does get banished. She wasn't banished at first. Little bitch boy Adam, pride hurt over rejection, tattled on her to God. God then sent 3 angels to retrieve her, hoping to bring her back to her violator to force her to honor her arranged marriage. Keep in mind, this is Jewish mythology, so God would be the same God that later religions were built on. However, in the Sumerian version of this text, the God figure is actually a specific god, the god Enki, god of wisdom and water, who you might recognize from my book. Which is why the Tree of Knowledge is so key to this story, because Enki didn't want anyone else to have total knowledge, because knowledge is power over the weak and the ill-informed. In some versions of the mythology, Adam claimed to God that Lilith violated him by asking to be on top. And even in some, Adam claimed that Lilith, wanting to have a spicy arrival herself, was also violating him because, again, like I said, bitch boy. Not gonna lie, the mythology version of Adam is 100% the type of dude who's gonna rub your left lip for 10 minutes and then ask you if you climaxed. Clearly, I don't like Adam. I think Viv nailed him in Has Been Hotel. The timing on the next portion of this legend does depend on the region and the decade of recitation. I'll be reciting the version that is still most common. Lilith met Lucifer, a fallen angel who rebelled against God. Why Lucifer rebelled is highly up for debate, and it greatly depends on the culture of origin. For example, despite Christianity coming from Judaism, there isn't a specific Satan in Jewish tradition, but rather he's seen more as a concept or a test of faith. The idea of a fallen angel is more common in Abrahamic religions, which stem from their shared history in Mesopotamia and became what we consider today to be Christianity and Islam. Although modern Christianity has roots in Judaism, it isn't fully Jewish. Technically, it's characterized as a mystery religion, a term given to religions that rose during the conquest of Alexander that mix European and Middle Eastern beliefs. But we're not going down that road today because we're sticking to the mythology portion. In Canaanite religions, which were the Sumerian region, though they were seen more as cultish religions, Lucifer was a parable to Atar, the morning star, who sought to occupy the throne of Baal. Lucifer refused to bow to the will of man, especially to Adam. His pride and rejection of direction led to his banishment from heaven. He didn't want to be his own god in the original mythology. He was a dreamer and a visionary and a very proud man. He felt that an archangel shouldn't have to kneel to anyone but God. For his devotion and his exaltation, he was banished. In some versions, Lucifer felt that God should allow humans to have their own free will and knowledge, and his desire to keep humans from being slaves was his reason for banishment. This version tends to align more with the myth of Enki and Sumerian beliefs. Again, these are true to mythologies, not any modern religions or anything that was based off of those mythologies that's modern. We're talking about the ancient times, not modern theology. Lilith was taken by Lucifer's plight and aspirations, so she decided to join him. She fell madly in love with Lucifer and him with her. In almost every version, Lilith is portrayed as poly and has other consorts within hell. Multiple marriages were common in godly pantheons, and monogamy was not normal for gods or higher status individuals. However, polyandry, which is the act of having multiple husbands, has been banished for non-gods in this area since 2300 BCE. However, polygamy was still acceptable and was for a long time. Jacob, David, clearly gender imbalance was a big deal, which is one reason why many groups broke off and became little pockets of religion or cults that worshipped Lilith or Lucifer. Lucifer didn't see Lilith as less than his equal. In fact, he indulged her desires and let her explore herself. He's often depicted as giving her adoration, devotion, and protection. Think Persephone and Hades, but minus the kidnapping. And they lived happily until God's angels found them. God's angels found Lilith. They demanded that she return to Adam. She refused, and as punishment, they said they would kill 100 of her demonic children every day until she did. Lucifer and Lilith created a plan, one to undermine God's desire to withhold knowledge, but in the same vein to also punish Adam for trying to control Lilith. Meanwhile, God gifted Adam a new wife. This time he made her from a piece of Adam, ensuring her to have a more submissive nature. However, a speaking serpent and a beautiful demoness convinced Eve to partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Fun fact, did you know the reason why we typically say that it is the apple that is the fruit of the tree of all knowledge is actually because of the play Paradise Lost? Realistically, it probably was something more akin to a pomegranate in this era. Eve then convinced Adam to join her, often seen as her innocently seducing him. And with that, the Garden of Eden fell. Adam lost everything, and everyone was punished. This is where Lilith's vampirism comes in. While Eve and all other women were cursed to have a horribly painful childbirth, Lilith was cursed to become barren. In a rebellion against her punishment, Lilith took to drinking the blood of babies and pregnant mothers. Unlike a vampire, she didn't need that blood to survive. But that blood still empowered her. And because of the partaking of the first blood indulgence, she is not only the recorded first instance of a creature feeding on human blood, but she spawned the vampire race that would be the first vampiric race. She spawned the Lilu and Lilitu demons, spirits who died before having children, but who would feed on the blood of babies and pregnant women to sustain their life. She was their mother, and her curse sired them. And she gave way to those demons who were the first race of creatures to commit acts of vampirism. We all know that vampires have long been an outlet for spiciality in fiction. Oftentimes, vampires feeding is seen as not only a loss of innocence, but a parable for essay of a virgin. Oftentimes, you'll see a woman as the victim of a male vampire, or another man as the victim of a male vampire. These both mirror the same thing, but in different ways. The inability to embrace one's spiciality due to society. For both gay men and for all women, it was that they were not allowed to indulge in their fantasies. The act of having spicy outside of a marriage or with someone who was the same gender as you was seen as a desecration of oneself for the majority of our history. I can't speak beyond that for gay men because although I am queer, I'm a queer woman, and my spiciality being bi is typically romanticized by men rather than punished. I can, however, speak as a woman, and not just a random woman, but a woman who grew up oppressed by a high-demand religion as a CSA survivor. And yes, this one specific chapter, unlike all the other ones, I am speaking about religion and not mythology. In religions that repress your spiciality and set high gender norms and then punish premarital spicy times, many women are forbidden to embrace their urges and desires. This typically leads to some pretty toxic fantasies, and to this day, because American society is built off of a religion that does all of those things, we still see those toxic fantasies play out in fiction. This is where I'm going to get a little dark romance book talk girly up in here today. We call it dark romance today, but it's been around for a very long time. The idea of women, for example, being pinned down and touched until they make you want it. Women being sold off into arranged marriages with tempting men who do taboo things in the bedchamber. Women being with horrible men who are only sweet to them, but they're ready to burn the world and all of the institutions that oppress you down. In the 1980s, it was bodice ripper historical romances that were incredibly non-consensual situations that afterwards she decided she liked. And of course, vampires biting you. A violent act, but nearly always shown as an extremely pleasurable and spicy one. So you might ask yourself, why do women do that? Well, we don't want any single one of those things in real life. So why are they in our fantasies? It's pretty simple. There are only two ways that an oppressed religious woman can experience her darkest urges, and that's if her husband does them to her, or if they were forced upon her. And good men in the religion, they're just as brainwashed and oppressed, so they're not going to do those things. And that mainly left the fantasy of force. Thus, the birth of kidnapping, hostage, twisted seduction, stalking, morally gray, arranged marriages, legit being owned, etc., tropes. It's a setting in which your spicy actions aren't your own fault, but it's also not violent grape. A perfect middle ground to explore your urges without the punishment of your religious institution. And now they're kind of just a lexicon of romance, a generalization that's baked into the fabric of femininity in fiction. Personally, I think fiction is the best place to indulge in a fantasy, as you can safely discover yourself and your interests before you seek a consenting partner off the page. But I am a spicy author of dark paranormal romances, so I am, in fact, extremely biased. But all that to say, the first example of a vampiric act being from a woman, as a way to not only punish her oppressive god, but escape the thumb of a man who was violating her, that's kind of ironic poetry, and it's not lost on me. I know this was a break from Baldur's Gate 3 and D&D content, but what can I say? I'm that crazy vampire girl. But no, seriously, I love lore, and not just from the Forgotten Realms. And although I do plan to still do a lot more D&D content, at my heart, I'm a lore girly, and I want to explore everything that means, not stay in a single little box. The origins of any mythology or creature are always a source of debate and conjecture in the academic world. So sharing the story of Lilith is just that. It's academic rhetoric. As lore, well, it's never perfectly cut and dry. You may have noticed that some of those gods' names do appear in the Forgotten Realms, like Baal. And this is because the Forgotten Realms, like most fantasy and paranormal stories, draws from real-world mythologies, cultures, and religions. This is just standard practice in writing and world building. It's nothing unique. And before we go, don't forget, we have a new Discord group, and I'll link that in the description below, so come and hang out with us. And I can't let you go without mentioning that my second book is currently taking pre-orders and will come out on May 1st, 2025. It is a spicy, why-choose vampire romance, and this book is enemies to lovers. And thank you for being here with me today. Writing and gaming, which includes researching for essays like this, they're my passions. And with subscribers like you, I get to share those passions. And I hope to see you again in the next one. Good night, darling.
And now you're all mine. And I'm all yours. Until morning, at least.